My brother made my life a living hell. He got my wife pregnant, and it turned out the son I thought was mine wasn't. Later on, he came crawling back to me after our parents disowned him and left me the entire inheritance, $2 million. I have a younger brother, Caleb, and he's hated me for as long as I can remember. If you're thinking this was some kind of jealousy thing, you'd be wrong. Caleb was the golden boy, the one mom and dad favored, not me. There was no reason for him to envy anything I had. Mom always pampered him, cooked his meals, and did his laundry, while I had to take care of everything myself. She even roped me into helping him with his schoolwork, as if it was my duty just because we were family. Funny thing is, no one expected Caleb to do anything for me in return. I accepted it, figured I was self-sufficient enough to manage on my own. Maybe that was my mistake, letting him get away with everything, never standing up for myself. Caleb never lifted a finger to help me, and the only time he acknowledged my existence was when he needed something. I was a quiet, introverted kid who liked reading and keeping to myself. Caleb? He was Dad's spitting image, loud, rough, and the center of attention. I guess I've always had a habit of saying things as they are, without sugarcoating. Mom didn't like that much. I think that's why she saw me in such a negative light, even when I was young. Caleb, on the other hand, could do no wrong in her eyes. I didn't let it bother me much, not until Caleb started making my life miserable. He'd tease me constantly, picking on how I looked or the fact that I wore glasses. Sometimes he'd sneak into my room just to snoop through my diary and tell Mom whatever I had written. I'd yell at him, tell our parents he was crossing the line, but they just laughed it off. Brothers will be brothers, they'd say. Caleb pushed things further, messing with my stuff. He once almost broke my glasses, and another time, he slipped something disgusting into my food. He thought it was hilarious to drop small rocks into my oatmeal. Luckily, I spotted them before I bit down. I told Mom, but she waved it off, saying that's just how siblings bond. Caleb knew exactly how to push my buttons. Any time we argued, he'd twist the knife, reminding me of everything I was insecure about. We went to the same school, and while I was dealing with bullies, Caleb was right there backing them up. He egged them on, calling me names, telling them I was just a loser. There were days I'd come home bruised, and Caleb would smirk like it was the funniest thing he'd seen. I remember one fight we had. I do not even recall what started it. Probably something trivial. But he looked me dead in the eye and told me he wished I was dead. Most of his insults rolled off my back, but that one? That hit different. I was already struggling with some dark thoughts at the time, and hearing my own brother say it crushed me. Dad was rarely home, and Mom either did not notice or did not care. I'll never forget the day she snapped at me, telling me it was my fault for provoking him. Things escalated when we were in high school. Caleb thought it would be funny to try and set my hair on fire. Mom brushed it off as just a prank. Who does that for fun? Thankfully, Dad stepped in. He had been distant most of my life, but something about that day flipped a switch in him. He warned Caleb he'd call the cops if he ever pulled something like that again. I had never seen Caleb so shocked. For once, he was not the one getting away with it. That night, Dad came to my room and sat down for a long talk. I did not expect him to take my side. He always told Caleb how much alike they were, and he was not wrong. But that day, he admitted something. He said he had been ignoring the problem, hoping Caleb was just a stupid kid. But he realized Caleb was turning into a bully, and not just any bully, my bully. Hearing that from Dad was a relief. I nearly cried right there. I opened up about everything. The bullying at school, the constant harassment at home. Dad was shocked. The next morning, he went straight to the school and had a word with the principal. He made it clear there would be serious consequences if the bullying continued. That evening, Dad signed me up for mixed martial arts classes at the local gym. He told me I needed to get stronger, not just physically, but mentally, and stand up for myself. I will not lie, I probably looked ridiculous in those first few classes of a scrawny kid learning how to throw punches. But I stuck with it, and slowly it started to pay off. Caleb did not stop being Caleb, though. One afternoon, he snuck into my room and stole the money I had been saving from doing chores. I had been stashing those bills for months. I caught him just as he was about to head out with his friends. I looked Caleb straight in the eye and told him to give my money back. He knew it was wrong to steal, and I was not going to let it slide. But Caleb just smirked and said the only thing I was good at was tattling to Dad. I do not know what came over me, but I punched him square in the face. Caleb was so stunned he did not say a word. He just hit the ground with a thud. I grabbed him by the collar, pulled the money out of his pocket, and let him drop back down. Caleb started bawling like a little kid. It was almost funny, a teenager sobbing in the dirt like that. Of course, Mom came running the moment she heard her precious baby crying. She practically flew out of the house to check on him. When she found out I had hit him, she was shocked at first, but it did not take long before she started scolding me. As usual, she told me I needed to set a good example as the older brother. Caleb just sat there, soaking it all in, enjoying the fact that I was the one getting chewed out. Mom even told Dad I had beaten up Caleb and said I needed to be kept in check. Later that night, Dad sat both of us down and demanded an explanation. I told him exactly what had happened, how Caleb stole the money I had been saving from chores. Caleb tried to defend himself, saying he needed the cash for a date, and that as his brother, I should have just helped him out. Dad was not having any of it. He told Caleb he was lucky I just punched him because anyone else might have called the cops. Dad made it clear, taking something that did not belong to him was stealing, plain and simple. Caleb did not like hearing that. He threw a fit, probably hoping Mom would back him up, but Dad stayed firm. When Caleb realized I was not going to get in trouble for hitting him, he lost it. He screamed about how much he hated me, stormed off to his room, and slammed the door. After that, Caleb kept his distance. I guess he finally figured out he could not bully me anymore, especially with Dad not putting up with his nonsense. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we were on equal footing. Even though he stopped messing with me physically, Caleb found other ways to get under my skin. When our parents were not around, he would throw insults my way, just to remind me how much he despised me. Over the years, it got worse. The older he got, the meaner he seemed. If I asked him something, he would ignore me, walk away, and mutter loser or nerd under his breath. If he had something to say to me, he would tell Mom instead, and she would pass along his messages like we were in middle school. I asked Mom why Caleb could not just talk to me directly, but she always told me to be patient and understanding. I was never sure if it was just a phase, something he would grow out of, or if he truly hated me that much. I could usually brush off his words, but at some point, I just wanted to leave, to get away from all the bitterness. I talked to Mom several times, asking her to set up a real conversation between us. I thought maybe if we just sat down and hashed things out, it would help, but she refused every time. I do not want to get involved, she would say. I even asked her why Caleb treated me the way he did, but she always brushed it off like it was nothing. Eventually, I left for the university I had always dreamed of attending. I had worked hard, earned top grades, and even secured a scholarship. Dad threw a party to celebrate, and for once, Mom seemed proud of me too. Caleb, though, stayed distant. He barely acknowledged my achievements, acting like he could not care less. The day I packed up and left for college was a mix of excitement and relief. I was thrilled for the future ahead, but even more so to escape the toxic atmosphere at home. The first few months at college felt like pure freedom. I made plenty of friends, loved my classes, and started building a life that had nothing to do with the shadows of home. Caleb's constant verbal jabs were gone, and for the first time, I felt a peace I never knew I needed. By my second year, I met Karen, the woman who would eventually become my wife. One of my fraternity friends introduced us at a party, and we hit it off immediately. Coming from a religious family, I was raised to believe having kids before marriage was out of the question. So when Karen told me she was pregnant during our senior year, we decided to get married right after graduation. The wedding was small but beautiful. Our families were happy for us, and we had a great time celebrating. Back then, I thought Karen was the love of my life, the one person I wanted to grow old with. I was the kind of guy who believed in staying faithful. I wanted a marriage where we both gave our all to each other and never strayed. Even though other women occasionally tried to flirt with me over the years, I never entertained the idea of cheating. I was genuinely happy with Karen, and the thought of hurting her never crossed my mind. But that did not stop her. Throughout our marriage, I discovered Karen had cheated on me twice. The first time was with a married coworker. It was an on-again, off-again affair that dragged on for years. The second time happened when she went back to visit her family in another state. She hooked up with an old high school boyfriend. I know people might call me a fool for staying, And honestly, looking back, I cannot blame them. For a while, things felt normal again. I could not fully trust her, but I tried. If I was going to forgive her, I had to let it go and move forward. For years passed since her second affair, and I thought I had made the right call, giving her another chance. Karen seemed different, like she genuinely wanted to make our marriage work. We had been happy, planning for the future and raising our son together. Then, 3 months ago, everything crumbled. Karen confessed to spend time with another man, for a long time. Worse, she admitted that our son might not even be mine. It felt like the floor vanished beneath me. The wave of betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak hit me all at once. I struggled to wrap my head around what she was saying. In disbelief, I asked her why she kept such a devastating secret. How could she do this, knowing the damage it would cause? Her reaction was cold. She was distant, as if the pain I felt did not matter. It was like she barely cared, despite the fact that I had been the one raising our son from day one. And then she told me the worst part. The man she had been with, the one who might be our son's real father, was Caleb. My heart stopped. I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. I could not believe it. Karen explained that it started after I introduced her to my family. She stayed with us over Thanksgiving and into the new year during our senior year. I remember Caleb being unusually polite back then, almost friendly, which was rare. I had been glad at the time, thinking it meant he was warming up to me for once. I did not want Karen to feel like an outsider, and she tried hard to bond with my family, especially Mom. She even asked why Caleb and I were not closer. I opened up, told her the truth, that I doubted Caleb and I would ever truly get along. Karen seemed to accept it, but I guess she thought she could fix things. She started including Caleb in our plans. When we planned movie nights, she invited him along. If we went out, she asked if he wanted to join. I figured she was just trying to bring us together. At the time, it felt like progress. Caleb and I were not exactly close, but we talked more. It felt better than the years of silence and cold shoulders. Little did I know, there was more going on behind the scenes. I remembered how Karen and Caleb would sometimes play video games together, but I never thought much of it. Karen told me how one night Caleb opened up to her about his struggles and a recent breakup. He had been vulnerable, and they bonded over it. She said he flirted with her here and there, mostly when I was not around. It seemed harmless at first, but at some point, things escalated, and she could not resist anymore. Hearing this, I closed my eyes, and my mind betrayed me, painting a vivid image of my wife and brother together. I felt sick to my stomach. Karen admitted she felt guilty afterward and left him. That part checked out because I remembered how, out of nowhere, she told me she wanted to head home right after Christmas. I had expected her to stay through New Year's, but she insisted on leaving. I tried to convince her to stay, but she brushed it off, saying she needed time at home. When we reunited at school, she was her usual bubbly self, and I did not think twice about it. 2 weeks later, we found out she was pregnant. Now Karen sat across from me, confessing that she had no idea who our son's biological father was, Caleb or me. She said she stayed with me because she knew, between the two of us, I was the reliable brother. That was why she married me. I felt my whole world caving in. The boy I had raised, who I spent countless hours with, might not even be mine. I asked Karen if she was still seeing Caleb. Her eyes dropped to the floor, and she nodded. Karen admitted they had stayed in touch because there was undeniable chemistry between them. She confessed that when she told me she was working late, she was often with him. Half her business trips were actually getaways with Caleb. I asked her why she even bothered marrying me if she wanted Caleb all along. Karen said she did not want to destroy our relationship. Seeing how I raised our son made her stay. She claimed she had made a mistake, but did not know how to stop. I told Karen I was glad she finally told me the truth, and that I would be packing my things and leaving. She burst into tears, begging me for forgiveness. Karen said I should be furious, shouting and screaming, not calmly walking away. But I could not give her that. I quietly went to the closet and began packing my bags. Karen kept repeating that if I truly loved her, I would fight for her, that every marriage faces mistakes. When she saw I was not budging, she changed tactics. She brought up how a divorce would affect our son, saying children need both parents. I reminded her that he might not even be my son. That broke her. She sobbed harder, accusing me of being cruel, of abandoning a boy I had raised since birth. It was as if Karen believed nothing could drive me away. Maybe that was on me. I had let her get away with too much in the past. I still loved parts of her, or maybe it was just the life we had built. The bond we shared raising our son felt like the glue that held us together. But knowing she had been with Caleb was too much. Karen insisted it was not too late. She believed we could fix things. I could not see how. Even if I forgave her, I would never forget. I left her crying in the doorway and checked into a hotel that night. The next day, I drove to my parents' house and told them everything. How Karen had been cheating with Caleb for years behind my back. Their shock was immediate. Mom, of course, jumped to Caleb's defense. She insisted it could not possibly be true, that her precious boy would never betray his brother like that. I needed them to hear the truth straight from Caleb, so I asked them to stay silent while I called him. I wanted them to listen in, but not say a word. When Caleb answered, I did not waste time. I confronted him directly, laying out everything I knew. At first, he denied it. He swore up and down that Karen was lying. But the moment I told him Karen had already confessed, his tone changed. He blamed her. He called her immoral and painted himself as the victim. Caleb told me it was not his fault if women found him more attractive, that he could not help being the better-looking brother. I told Caleb straight up I was going to expose him to everyone. He laughed, said no one would believe me because he was the golden child. I just smiled at his arrogance and thanked him for confirming everything, because our parents had been listening to the entire call. Caleb went silent. He stammered, trying to walk it back, throwing out weak excuses and scrambling to save face. Mom, still in shock, demanded an explanation. Caleb mumbled something pathetic, blaming everyone but himself. He tried to pin it all on Karen, desperately shifting the blame anywhere he could. I watched as the disappointment settled into Mom's face, the same mother who had defended Caleb his entire life. Now, she stood there, grappling with anger and disbelief. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I had endured Caleb's bullying for so long. But now, the truth was out, and the tables had turned. Caleb was exposed, and his lies lay bare for everyone to see. His excuses began to crumble. Then Dad, usually calm and reserved, took the phone. His voice carried the weight of every ounce of disappointment he had ever felt. Caleb, he said, his tone sharp, unwavering. What you did is not just a betrayal of your brother. It is a betrayal of this family. You was with your brother's wife and kept doing it after they were married. There are consequences for your actions. You have broken the trust we had in you. I raised you both to value family, loyalty, and integrity. But today, you threw all of that away. Dad paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. From this day forward, I am cutting you off. The college fund I set aside for you? Gone. You will have to figure out how to pay for school on your own. And I will not be supporting your lifestyle any longer. If you think being a man means having affairs with married women, let us see how you handle it when you have to stand on your own 2 feet. I stood there, silent, as Dad's words washed over me. I had wanted to scream at Caleb, to let years of frustration boil over. But hearing Dad lay down the law was better than anything I could have said. Caleb tried to argue, but Dad cut him off, ending the call abruptly. Afterward, Mom walked over to me and pulled me into a hug. It had been years since she had hugged me like that. There was an unspoken apology in her embrace, a quiet acknowledgement of everything I had endured. I am sorry, she whispered. I thought back to my younger self, the 14-year-old boy who never imagined this moment would come. With Dad's help, I found a good divorce lawyer. Karen and her attorney tried to play dirty, demanding alimony because I earned more. But her infidelity worked in my favor. We also did a paternity test. The results confirmed what I already feared. Caleb was the biological father of the boy I had raised as my son. I cannot put into words how much that broke me. Somehow, it hurt worse than Karen's confession. I was furious. The boy I loved, the one I thought was mine, was not. Karen begged me to stay in his life. She said it was not his fault, that he should not suffer for her mistakes. But I could not do it. Looking at him, I saw Caleb. And I hated it. Once the divorce was finalized, I moved into a small apartment. It felt strange living alone. I had married so young. I had never lived by myself. But I adjusted quickly. I had always been independent, and in time, I grew to love the solitude. 2 weeks ago, Dad called. He told me he was rewriting his will. He did not want Caleb to inherit anything. If there is one thing you need to know about my father, it is that when he makes up his mind, there is no turning back. He was done with Caleb. Caleb tried reaching out to our parents. He even showed up at their house, pleading for forgiveness. Dad did not let him pass the front door. Mom, who had always caved to Caleb's every whim, seemed just as disappointed in him as Dad and me. I could tell it hurt her the most. Even so, Caleb never once reached out to apologize. Not to me anyway. He did not seem remorseful, just upset that our parents wanted nothing to do with him. Dad told me he was leaving everything to me in his will, ensuring Caleb would not inherit a dime. He planned to leave him $1, a symbolic gesture to prevent Caleb from contesting it. I was stunned. Dad had worked hard his entire life. Between his assets, pension, and life insurance, the inheritance would be worth nearly $2 million. The only condition was that if Dad passed before Mom, she would stay in the house, though ownership would transfer to me. I had no issue with that. I wanted to make sure Mom was cared for. Somehow, Caleb found out. Since he could not reach our parents, he called me yesterday, hoping to patch things up. He told me how hard it had been to pay for college. Now that Karen knew Henry was his son, she was demanding child support. Caleb claimed he was broke, struggling to find part-time work. He begged me to talk to the family to help him start over. I laughed in his face. I told him I was done. He should have thought about all this before he was with my wife and got her pregnant. Caleb tried to argue, saying Karen was just as much to blame. I agreed. I reminded him that I divorced her. Now she was his problem. If he had issues with Karen or Henry, he should deal with the fallout himself. Caleb's voice grew louder, but I cut him off. I told him he was no longer the family's golden child, just a disgrace who slept with his brother's wife. That was when Caleb broke down crying. He said the entire family was turning on him, even our grandparents. But I did not care anymore. I told him we were done, and he should never call me again. As far as I was concerned, he was no longer my brother. I keep replaying that conversation in my head. I wish I could stop, but I cannot. I know some people think I should stay in Henry's life. I thought about it. I really did. But here's the truth. I cannot. Seeing Henry means seeing Karen, and I want nothing to do with her anymore. If I keep visiting Henry, she will find a way back into my life, and I cannot let that happen. Call me selfish or cruel, but I cannot face him. At least not right now. A lot of you guessed right. It was Mom who told Caleb about the will. I confronted her about it in front of Dad. She broke down crying. Mom said Caleb had suffered enough, and she believed he had learned his lesson. Dad was not having it. He told Mom flat out, if she thought Caleb deserved forgiveness, then he could not live with her anymore. He said he would never forgive Caleb's betrayal. The threat shut her down immediately. Dad made it clear, if she ever talked to Caleb again and we found out, she would have to leave. That was the end of the discussion. My father is a stubborn man. Hopefully, Mom understands that now. It has been 5 months since my last update. My relationship with my parents has improved. Dad and I play golf together every weekend now. He treats me more like a friend than a son. Mom misses Caleb, but she keeps her distance. The last I heard about Caleb came from our cousin. Apparently, Caleb has been asking everyone for money. He ended up dropping out of college because he could not afford tuition. Now he and Karen live together. Caleb picked up a part-time job as a mechanic. From what I hear, they are raising Henry together. Maybe that is for the best. When I talk to my parents, Caleb's name never comes up. For those wondering how I am doing, I am good. I got a promotion 2 months ago, and my salary increased significantly. I'm not dating anyone yet. I feel like I need more time to heal. I started seeing a therapist, so we will see how that goes. Let me know what you think of this story. I know some people may disagree with how I handled Henry, but unless you have lived through this, it is hard to say how you would react. Thanks for sticking around until the end. Make sure to check out our other videos and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.